Welcome everyone, and thank you Lara for the introduction and to the EDS Society for having me. I just wanted to start off by saying that I have basically not stopped smiling since I've got here, because to me it's just so special to bring together the Australian hypermobility community together like this. So it's an incredible honour and a privilege to be here with you all, and I'm really grateful that you're here too. My name's Melissa, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm here with you today to start a conversation on innovation in healthcare. But before I introduce myself properly, I'd like to start off by acknowledging the lands we're on. I myself am from Wurundjeri country in Melbourne, but I'd like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara people of this region, who collectively form part of one of the oldest living cultures on this planet and are said to be the first innovators. I'd like to extend my respects to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are here in the room today, joining us from home, or who might be watching this recording back at some point in time. It always was, and it always will be, Aboriginal land. So as a physiotherapist, I've been serving the hypermobility community for almost 15 years. And I do that through not one, but two small business ventures, which you can see pictured on the screen for full disclosure. And I also feel it's important to locate myself as white, cisgendered, and heterosexual. I'm also able-bodied, though through my own journey with infertility, I connect deeply with the experience of feeling let down by my body, my practitioners, and the healthcare system at times. These identities and experiences inform my view of the world and the insights that I'll share with you today. Actually, we'll go back. So some of the things that I'm not are an academic, and despite being up here on stage for a tech panel, my tech skills day to day are pretty laughable. So please do come and talk to me over the next day or two, but if you've got Apple Watch questions, please save them for our panel. So when I set out on this healthcare caper, it's fair to say I didn't aspire to be where I am today. I didn't dream of becoming an expert, and I certainly didn't consider myself innovative. But I stand here before you today having learned a great deal about people, about systems, and about bringing ideas to life. And I believe that that potential exists within all of us. And if we nurture this, together, we can solve the problems we're facing in caring for hypermobile humans. One of the biggest problems that we're facing is that it still takes too bloody long to diagnose these conditions. Excuse my Australian. As we've heard from speakers yesterday, it takes on average around 10 to 16 years to be diagnosed with EDS in Australia. And I heard one speaker yesterday say that it was actually 28 years for her. So this isn't a statistic, this is a reality for many people in this room. The lack of recognition in this country means that it's difficult to find people to care for you, professionals to care for you. And it usually means that one or two well-meaning practitioners end up doing the heavy lifting within the rigid confines set by our disciplines. The issues that people present with related to their hypermobility are often not being addressed efficiently, effectively, and sometimes not even safely. And we have Colin Halverson's research group to support this. Hypermobile people are feeling increasingly isolated in their struggles. And sadly, the list that you see on this screen isn't exhaustive. And then we have our care providers. Many of you who are in this room who so desperately want to help. I've heard many of you say that you feel under-resourced, underprepared, and unsupported to do so. So this stifles creativity and innovation, and it often leads to moral distress, vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, burnout, and sadly, some of you will leave the profession because of that. For physios, I've heard that it's around about the 5-year mark. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare says that we're currently facing significant healthcare workforce shortages. In 2023, it was reported that over 80% of health professional occupations in Australia were in shortage. It's clear that our workforce is growing at a much slower rate than the demand for care, which is further impacting the quality and accessibility of that care. And so around and around we go. Some of you may be wondering how Australia measures up in this innovation department. And so the World Index of Healthcare Innovation was published in late 2024, in December, I believe. It currently places us at number 9, just behind the likes of Switzerland, Ireland, and Germany. And what this index does is that it ranks 32 national healthcare systems on quality, choice, science and tech, and fiscal sustainability. What I can tell you is that as a nation, we performed well in the areas of quality and choice when compared to other countries. But where we can be doing better is in our scientific research output, clinical trial activity, and how effectively we spend as we grow. So perhaps this looks like we're doing okay, but we definitely have a ways to go. And it's important for us to keep improving and fostering a culture of innovation in healthcare, not just here in Australia, but around the world. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what it means to innovate and why it matters, what drives innovation. I hope to share some examples and practical tips for both the health professionals in the room and the folks managing these conditions. And I mostly hope that you'll leave here today feeling inspired and ready to act on your next great idea. So my talk this morning is going to be a little bit shorter so we can get into the meaty bit of the panel and the Q&A. So over the next 10 minutes or so, we're going to do just that. And then we have a lovely panel next to me who are going to dive deeper into all things technology, tools, and teams. So here's an idea for how you may choose to participate throughout this session, and hopefully throughout the rest of the conference. It's about tending to your needs and doing all the things that you're going to hear about this weekend. And if you've heard me speak before, you'll probably know what I'm about to say. And I'd particularly, as a physio, like to highlight this first point about moving and adjusting your bodies. One of my favourite facilitators likens this to the actions of a fussy cat. So as I look around over the next hour or so, I'd really like to see some fussy cats in the room. This is a really simple idea. I get that. And as Dr. Seuss says, sometimes the questions are complicated and the answers are simple. And I wonder just how many of us would allow the simplicity here to become a barrier to following through with an idea. An innovation is what a done idea looks like, done being the key word. It's usually novel or significantly improves on what we're already doing. An innovation moves beyond an idea or a theory to solve a problem, and it drives meaningful and positive change. So today on our panel, we'll be focusing on apps, wearables, online programs and platforms, models of care, and artificial intelligence as just some of the recent innovations changing the way we deliver care for hypermobility. Author Jim Collins is famous for saying that there's no shortage of ideas, and perhaps you're wondering, where do these ideas come from? Well, a global learning conference is a really good place to start, and it helps if we surround ourselves with the right people. Remember that people won't speak up unless they feel safe to do so. And we need to foster this kind of environment, a psychologically safe environment, and be open to ideas from everywhere. I like to remember that sometimes innovations come from the people and the places that we least expect. So, what do these three things have in common? Perhaps for the people in the room, if you don't know your neighbour, you could turn and introduce yourself. If you're joining us from home, you can ponder this on your own, or if you're with someone. But maybe just take a couple of moments to turn to the person next to you and see if you can figure out what these three things have in common. We have a picture of a bicycle, the Beatles are in the middle, and a phone. Yay. All right, everybody. So, did anyone guess that these three ideas were innovative? Maybe a show of hands, yeah? Okay, you're right. But maybe what you don't know is that in the early stages, these three things were actually not thought to be good ideas. Yeah. So acted upon, they've gone on to impact the lives of millions, if not more, people around the world. And so I guess the point here I'm trying to make is that not every idea is a good one, and it's not necessary that we even act upon every idea that we have, but don't let this put you off. The best way to find out if something is a good idea is to try it. And in this setting that we're talking about today, taking action really is the only way forward. So for the innovators in the room, which I hope is all of you, I think is all of you, for good measure, I've included some questions for you to consider for your next big idea. Does it solve a problem? Can you test your idea? Do you have the resources to implement and then measure the impact? Is it sustainable? And is now the right time? Thomas Edison is quoted as saying, "I've not failed, I've just found 9,000 ways that won't work." So innovation really requires us to get comfortable with failure. Show of hands in the room, who's comfortable with failure? Oh, okay, we've got more than I thought. Because the reality is most new ideas will fail. This is part of the process, and we need to keep what works and move on quickly from what doesn't. I'd like to suggest that we work towards making good mistakes, and good mistakes are those that come from an honest effort and a diligent attempt to do it well. Okay, so something I'm particularly proud of is the story of how our team at Zebras Australia found their groove in delivering interdisciplinary care, and we'll hear a little bit more about this on the panel in a moment. But I'd like you to picture this. It's 2021. The world is in the midst of a global pandemic, and we as a business, as an organisation, had just moved into a brand new space. There were 4 of us back in those days, and we were all physios. And unlike the Beatles, we thought we might have had a good idea. We dreamed of providing care that was tailored to the unique needs of the Zebras community. Care that considered the whole person and was actually collaborative and sustainable for us to deliver. So you can decide if this is groundbreaking or not. Together, we underwent a process of unlearning much of what our training had prepared us to do, and then we had to relearn how to take care of people and ourselves at the same time. It required us to listen deeply to the community, to draw on much lived experience, and to try a whole lot of things that hadn't been done before. Caring for the whole person came with a fresh set of challenges, and it was initially difficult to communicate this to the community. And it really pushed us to consider our scope of practice, our roles and responsibilities. Fortunately, other health professionals decided to join us, and our unidisciplinary clinic went to a multidisciplinary one. We believed that there was a lot of value in learning together, so we developed an online training program for upskilling our new team members that wasn't so discipline specific. With fresh perspectives, we found new ways of working and collaborating as a team, and we started to soften the boundaries of our roles and began to share our responsibilities and build strong relationships with practitioners and organisations outside of our own. It's been a long, beautiful, and often messy process, and for me, it really feels like it's just begun. So this is that team, minus a few, in December 2024. a team of 21 healthcare workers who hold the complexity of hypermobility with such care each and every day. So I encourage you to go ahead and take action. It doesn't have to be groundbreaking. Be open to ideas from everywhere and make good mistakes, because this will give rise to the technology, the tools, and the teams that will collapse the diagnostic journey for our patients, improve access to quality care, and better equip our health professionals and systems in the future. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much. You've got me for a little bit longer. So I'm now honoured to chair the first panel today on evolving care models and tech. Are these your glasses, Alan?
Oh, they might be.
You need them?
Oh, no, they're not mine. No.
Okay.
I just want to check with John and the tech team. There was a message come up saying Slido wasn't working. The irony has not been lost on me in the tech.
Slido's back up.
Brilliant.
That's very funny, tech team.
Yeah.
Well played. We'll persevere. Okay, so through this panel, I've just got some disclosures here for you first. So encourage you to share your thoughts and experiences during the panel discussion. I had it here in my notes via the Slido questions, so we'll see how we go. And as we've sort of stated earlier, we will conclude the session with a Q&A where the panel will answer all of your burning questions. And I'm determined to get to that today and make sure there's time. So we are going to touch on a number of topics, including online rehabilitation and programs and platforms, online networking and support for healthcare professionals, the benefits of support groups and community platforms, as well as leveraging technology for symptom management. So I'd just like to start with a round of applause for our amazing panel. Hello, panel. Perhaps we can start with some introductions. Maybe if we go from Caelum first, if you would like to tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Caelum Schild, an exercise physiologist from Adelaide, and I see people with an expanded scope of practice in that setting, and see people via home visit in clinic and also telehealth as well. So I've got a particular interest in a lot of the tech and app sort of area.
Excellent. I'm Sophie Shepherd. I'm a titled pain physiotherapist working at Vive Pain and Fatigue, and also a current PhD candidate. And from a research perspective, I have a lot of interest in scope of practice and particularly transdisciplinary models of care, as well as regional and rural health, where innovation often becomes, and tech also plays a pivotal role.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scarlett Eagle. I work for the Ehlers-Danlos Society on our community education team. Currently, I work on creating educational resources about EDS and HSD, but I've also been involved in many of our community support services, like our helpline and virtual support groups.
Hi, I'm Alan Hakim. I'm a rheumatologist and internal medicine consultant based in London. I'm the Chief Medical and Scientific Officer for the Ehlers-Danlos Society, and I'm here today to talk about our ECHO program.
And I'm Michelle O'Sullivan. I'm an occupational therapist, and I've been working in this space for about 15 years. I also created an online platform, Hypermobility Connect, which I think a lot of health professionals in the room may be part of that professional network. So I'm here to talk about that and all things tech.
Thank you, everybody. I'm sure you'll all agree there's so much wisdom and expertise on this panel, and I'm secretly looking forward to learning a lot too. So my first question is actually for Soph, and I touched on interdisciplinary care just a moment ago, but I'm wondering if you could expand on this a little bit and talk about what sorts of models exist beyond the multidisciplinary model we all know so much about.
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's often a few terms that people might see used when we're describing different models of care, and some of these terms that Mel mentioned and that are up on the slide there might be familiar terms to you, but I think actually unpacking what they mean when we're talking about them really helps us to make sense of it and to think about the ways that we might actually start to innovate and do things differently. So we can kind of think of it through an analogy. So Mel touched on unidisciplinary models of care, and this is like if we were thinking about an apple. So, you know, an apple's pretty good, right? But at the end of the day, it's just an apple. You know, it's a single professional. There's nothing mixed in. It's pretty clear what it is. When we start looking at multidisciplinary care, which is where we might have several different health professionals involved, multidisciplinary care really refers to where we might have a few different people in the mix. So, you know, if we think about a salad, maybe we've got some tomato, maybe we've got some lettuce, maybe we've got some onion. In the case of our multidisciplinary team, you know, we might have a physio, we might have a psych, we might have our GP, we might have our specialist. But multidisciplinary care sort of implies that these things are maybe in the mix, but maybe not really well integrated and mixed up. So in a salad, you know, you can still kind of pick out the separate things and yeah, they're mixed together, but they're kind of still doing their own thing. And then when we move on to interdisciplinary models, this is where things start to really become a little bit more cohesive. So if we think of it more like a stew, so we might have multiple health professionals involved, but actually things are much more integrated and cohesive, and it's all working together to sort of work towards a single thing. And so this might be where you have your physios, your GPs, your psychs, all really working together and coming together around the person. So maybe they're setting on and working towards the same sort of goals. They're working collaboratively in terms of their treatment plans. And this is kind of the gold standard for a lot of what we see in terms of, a lot of our care for complex conditions, particularly if we're talking about things like pain management. This is sort of the models that are considered to be gold standard for a lot of complex conditions. The area I'm interested in from an innovation perspective is actually when we start to look at some of these emerging models of care around transdisciplinary care. And this is where we might start to see that rather than having our traditional scopes of practice, so we all might have an understanding of, say, what a psychologist does, or what a GP might do, or what a specialist might do, or a physio, or whoever it might be. In a transdisciplinary model, we really start to blend what these roles look like, and so we can think of it almost like a bit of a soup. We're starting to take bits and pieces from the different professional areas and blending them together. So I think this is where it becomes really important, because like Mel touched on, we do have a lot of challenges in terms of workforce, in terms of the practicalities of getting these interdisciplinary teams together. So, if we can start to maybe rethink the ways that these look, and thinking about maybe we can expand roles, working extended scope, or starting to share roles a little bit better so we can meet that unmet need, I think that's where this gets really exciting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your insights. Certainly an area that gets me very excited, and an exciting frontier to be working on. We'll kind of stay on the theme of models of care, and we'll move to telehealth now. And we've certainly seen a huge uptick in virtual care through the pandemic and on the other side of it. So my next question is actually for Michelle, and I'd love for you to speak to us about how telehealth has changed your practice over the last 15 years, or even most recently.
Yeah, so I actually started working with telehealth almost 15 years ago. So Skype was the platform that we used, and it was a bit unpredictable and a bit unreliable, but it was amazing because it allowed me to connect with clients all over Australia and sometimes around the world as well. And so I felt very fortunate for that experience when the pandemic hit, because telehealth was very common practice for me. So it was very hard for a lot of my colleagues, though, to be able to pivot and work from a different model, because you can't really do traditional OT through a computer. So we very much had to think about how we could switch that. But I think for me, it was the access both to clients having access to me, but also the access to online learning. And I think if we think about technology, this conference wouldn't be happening because all of our meetings happened on Zoom. from so many different countries at all kinds of times of the night or morning for people elsewhere. And yeah, I just think it's so amazing to think that we don't actually need to necessarily jump on a plane to go to a conference anymore. I went to my first EDS conference in the US in 2010, and it was an epic journey and it was amazing, but now we can access this information so much more easily.
Yeah, I'm really hearing a theme of accessibility in there. And to stay with that theme, I might come back to you, Soph, because I imagine there would be some folks in the room thinking, are there certain services that are more or less difficult to deliver over telehealth, and physio being one of them? Could you talk a little bit more to that? And, you know, can we even do physio over telehealth?
It's a good question. I get that one all the time. I think it's interesting, actually, just from a show of hands. I imagine that we're probably sitting with maybe a more familiar audience, but how many here actually would think of telehealth and think of like a phone call? Yeah, a couple of hands? Yep. I would say, at least in my area, that's probably the common perception. So to me, that makes total sense when people are like, how on earth do you do physio over telehealth? Like, a phone call doesn't make sense. But actually, telehealth platforms now are often utilising video, which means we can actually do a lot. And most of what we do in terms of, you know, getting our really detailed history and movement assessments and functional assessments, I would say probably a good 90 to 95% of what we do can actually be done over telehealth. And, you know, I think most of the health professionals in the room would probably agree that there's a fair chunk of what they can do that works really well in that format. And I think, you know, it's really helpful from that access perspective, because we know that there are just so many benefits to being able to tap into that. And so if it means that people then have that enhanced access to services they otherwise wouldn't have, they can access telehealth from the comfort of their home. You know, there's just so many benefits to it that, you know, on the off chance that there are aspects of the intervention that we can't do over telehealth, there are still mechanisms to connect with someone maybe locally to help support that. And, you know, we'll probably end up touching on that a little bit later too.
Thank you, Soph. So, AV team, I think Slido's still down. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Oh,
you back up?
Okay. These don't look like us. So I might, AV team, if we can go back just to the slide that we were on. Yeah, thank you. I'd love to hear from the audience now. What's, you know, in terms of a benefit that you've had from telehealth? Actually, this one's going to be a little bit hard to do without Slido, isn't it? AV team, could we get Slido number 1? Otherwise, we'll move on. All right, let's do the next question. So there are some really wonderful platforms available now for our community. And particularly, I'd like to give a special mention to the Zebras Club, which is run by Jeannie DeBon, who couldn't be here with us today. And also Actively Autoimmune by Zoe McKenzie, who's closer to home. So I might come back to you, Soph, and just chat to you about your experience with delivering online rehab programs, if that's something you've seen much of.
Yeah, absolutely. So our clinic, Vive Pain and Fatigue, is completely telehealth based now. So we see everyone over telehealth. And I think it's really been interesting, because what has come out from that, aside from the general adaptation that needs to happen when you transition from working in a physical clinic to working online, is that you do start to rethink the ways that we can actually do this well. And predominantly our clinic has worked more in sort of a one-on-one rehab setting. And so while we have run groups in the past, we do most of our work in that one-on-one space. And so I guess what we've found is that it's often about trying to work out what resources and assets that somebody has local to them that we can also coordinate with. So I think the beauty of telehealth, particularly knowing that there are so many areas of Australia where people might not have access, and internationally as well, is that people are able to sort of tap into rehab programs or to professionals who might have more of particular training in an area or more expertise in a certain area, and then use that to sort of help supplement what they're doing on the ground. And I know a lot of the programs that you mentioned, Mel, you know, often people are using them in a similar way as well to really supplement what they're doing with their healthcare teams locally. I think in my experience, it's been really great, particularly when we're able to explore this idea of shared care and co-care. So what that often looks like in the context of our work is that we might be working with people and sort of taking that really big picture look and sort of giving them, I guess, maybe the more specialised sort of education or sort of intervention to help guide things. But we can then actually connect with, say, their physio on the ground, or if they've got a exercise physiologist local to them that we can connect with and say, hey, this is what we're doing and what we're talking about. Here's maybe a bit of information about EDS or pain or fatigue that, you know, that professional might not necessarily be as experienced in, but by collaborating with them, it means that person can kind of work with them and have that added support. So I think particularly when we look at the context with all the issues that you mentioned before, Mel, about having workforce shortages and issues accessing it, that online format, particularly for rehab programs, just holds so much value, and there's a lot that can be explored in that space.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'll come back to you, Mish, now as well, in terms of the role that, we'll go to the next slide, talking more to the health professionals in the room now, but what role has technology played in access to targeted care for these conditions, EDS and HSD, over the last 15 years?
Yeah, so I think definitely what I mentioned before about being able to access information and experts all over the world through different programs, through Ed's Echo and all of those sorts of things. I originally started Hypermobility Connect here in Australia, I think it was about 2016, because there wasn't much happening and we were all very siloed. There's a bunch of us doing things, but we weren't connected. So we managed to, I guess, leverage social media and our existing networks to create a hypermobility health professionals network, which on last check had about 300 Australian professionals with various levels of experience sharing with each other and, you know, being connected and being able to help manage with referrals and finding people in local areas. And it's so great to realise that so many people that have spoken on these panels over the last day and today and tomorrow have actually been part of that network. So it's been amazing to realise. And this was a little animation, but it may not work, just showing like all of the connections, like they're actually locations of people that we have, and over time, it has been amazing to connect people across the country. New Zealand, we've got our Kiwis in our group as well, which is awesome. And yeah, so just being able to share that knowledge and really support.
Me.
Yeah, there we go. So being able to support each other and upskill and, you know, all with the aim of helping our clients. So.
Thanks, Mish. And these were a couple of the particular networking and support groups. Were there any that you wanted to highlight there?
I just think that, like, if we think about it, this picture would have been very different 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. None of it existed here in Australia. So I actually personally flew to the UK to get my diagnosis. That's how, like, lacking in services it was here in Australia. So I think it's just amazing to see that each of us are creating things that are actually complementary and collaborative and really connected to each other now. And I feel like that's all thanks to technology. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Alan, can you tell us about EDS Echo and how do health professionals and the community get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, I mean, my first reflection is if you look at this now and you look at the infrastructure, you'll think, well, where's the innovation? And because there's a history behind this. And I want to take us right back 20 years because Project Echo celebrated its 20th anniversary back in 2023. Now, the inception of it was all designed around trying to improve access to experts in the hepatitis center in Albuquerque in New Mexico. And Sanjeev Arora, Professor Arora, who's the hepatologist there, was really the innovator. And he spent a lot of time working with the Zoom designers that we now, the technology which we now take for granted, to really build out a network of clinicians in his own state. And that just expanded interstate across the United States and then became a global phenomenon. And this was all happening kind of slightly outside of our line of sight at the Ehlers-Danlos Society. But an amazing example of technical innovation through a need. Jump forward to 2018, and I'm at a meeting in Maastricht, a conference, and I bump into Lara, and I say, Lara, the conferences are great, but there has to be a better way for us to connect with each other on a regular basis and just talk about stuff on a regular basis internationally. And she said, well, have you heard of Project Echo? I was like, no. So we went and we explored, and we went to Albuquerque, and we got trained up, and we were absolutely in awe of the innovation. And actually they said to us, we're not sure whether this is going to work for you in the rare disease space, because nobody's working in the rare disease space. So we were the first innovators in the rare disease space using the Project Echo model. So we started in 2019 to design the programs, and the whole principle here is you have a network of people that are bouncing off the Zoom technology, talking to each other wherever they are, about anything that they need to talk about. And the whole principle is that you move the knowledge between the experts and the people that are learning from you, and not the people. And also you build up a reputation for being a safe space where it's all teach and all learn. And that was all quite innovative too in terms of sort of overall principles. So we started it in 2019, and I think one of my observations is that we became very adept at being able to do things virtual. So when the pandemic hit, we were actually already ahead of the game and front running. And it's one of those bizarre things that out of chaos sprung a huge opportunity to actually make this expand and work internationally at much, much faster pace because of need. And I think the two key areas of innovation that we then brought in were along the lines of becoming more interdisciplinary. So we had an opportunity for everybody to talk with each other, work with each other, become that, move away from the salad to the roast or whatever.
Soup.
And that's where our major innovation was. And then the next thing was that we became the first in this space to introduce advocacy as part of the program. So we actually took it to the community too. So there's some examples of innovation within the concepts of move knowledge, not people. So we have some Slido questions, but I'm not sure whether Slido's working. So Slido's still down, so technology has failed us. But we can.
The irony.
I always remind people that you can pick up the phone and you can still email us. And it's amazing the number of people that don't use the phone anymore, but it is of itself an amazing technology. Hands. This was for the healthcare professionals, so we'll have to do it in the room without knowing what the virtual audience is thinking. But I mean, for those healthcare professionals in the room, could you put your hand up if you have heard of EDS Echo? Well, there you go. Okay. So one of the other things that we spent a lot of time on from a technology perspective was using social media and various other platforms to really get the word out there. Again, not massively impressive in terms of innovation and rocket science, but using all the different technologies that there are to market and expand awareness. Those that are aware of it or have been part of it, how much has it made an impact on your knowledge in the care of your patients? Let's just ask, has it made an impact, yes or no? And all the hands go up, and some of them are raving, yeah. And that's really
What's going on?
and that's really empowering to see the success. So this is what it's all about. So we've heard about this from an access perspective. We've heard about it from a workforce perspective. So what we're trying to do here is we recognise that access is difficult across the different specialties. There aren't enough people with the expertise at your local sites. Well, instead of having to go somewhere at a distance, travel to the United Kingdom or wherever to get that expertise, we're all readily available across the world to talk to each other and to support each other, mentor each other, give advice, so that the local clinician can treat somebody locally. And that's the fundamental principle, which at the time was totally innovative. And just to date, we've had 2,400 healthcare professionals join our program, and it grows by about 500 every year. And it's been an absolute pleasure and honour for me to be leading that. And I can only, people have been very, very kind, saying, yesterday was amazing, today's amazing, the network's amazing. Well, this is how it happens. This is the innovation, the networking that you described, which I thought looked more like a map for Qantas Airlines.
I know, right?
Although the Northern Territory wasn't doing too well.
Very empty if anyone's from the Northern Territory.
There's just sheep up there, there's the cattle up there, right? It's just... Ah, it does. Okay.
Very accurate.
Right. We'll have to have a word with them. This is why it is what it is, because we've been allowed to network. So there's your outcome.
Thank you, Alan. It's an incredible program, and highly encourage anyone that's thinking about ECHO programs for 2025 to look into that. We're going to move on to tech now, and I think my first question here will be for Caelum. Could you give us some examples of technology that you've used in your practice?
Yeah, so there's a lot of tech that I do use, and I think it certainly lends itself to a telehealth setting. There are obviously things that, on a telehealth setting, it allows us to be able to get feedback and gain some of that objective data as well from people if we're not there in the room with them. One of the first areas that I typically use for people is an app called PhysiApp, which is quite useful to help people with exercise prescription or movement prescription that's personalised for them. And it's something that can also assist with adherence as well. So from that side of things, it does allow people to set notifications and things as well, to be able to help with doing their movement at appropriate times in an appropriate way. And then the other few apps that I tend to use as well, so Guava is another app that is quite useful. It's reasonably new, but it does use.
Guava people are coming in the room.
I know Guava here today, I think, so, which is lovely to support us. Yeah. But yeah, like it's been a game changer for me personally with the way I work with people, because it does allow us to be able to sort of capture some of that wearable data in a really usable manner. And it does a whole plethora of things. Probably the one that is a real sort of standout for me is the insights section. And that allows us to look at that own individual's correlations between perhaps some of their objective data and some of their symptom monitoring as well. And then the EDS Society's own app is something both from a mentoring and a patient perspective that I really like. It's split into two sections, so it allows an individual to log in who may have EDS or HSD and practitioners as well. And probably the couple areas there that I find quite useful are the diagnosis section. It provides quite a clear overview of diagnosis, and again, if we're working in a telehealth model, particularly in a rural remote area, and the local GP might be extremely supportive but may have never heard of EDS before, and so that can help us to help the patient to advocate and work through that diagnostic criteria as well with references, which is fantastic. And then from there, obviously, we've got the plethora of wearable devices, which we hopefully get a chance to discuss a little bit further. And then tools which use heart rate variability tracking as well. And it's not probably specifically to apps, but transcutaneous vagus nerve stimulation is more of a tech-orientated area that we're just starting to look at, probably more so for the autonomic dysfunction side of things.
Thank you very much for that, and we will circle back to heart rate variability in a moment. So if I know this is an area that you're really passionate about and also work in as well, can you talk to us about some of the benefits of these apps and wearables that we're touching on?
Yeah, I think that was a great summary around some of the more specific apps that can be used, and I think the reality is that there's just such a wide range of them. Like they, often hear the running joke that there's an app for everything now, and I think that's really true. Everything from different symptom management and monitoring, to intervention, mindfulness interventions, apps that help with sleep, apps that track activity. There's so many different advantages to them. So I guess one of the big advantages is that becomes a really accessible technology for people to be able to really track and manage symptoms, and to get a bit of insight into their unique experience and what might be contributing to symptoms or patterns that will then help them move towards their goals. But of course then, like we touched on just before, that's also great then data that can be used to help communicate with your providers, because being able to go to them and say, hey, look, this is the app I'm using. I've done a collection of data, over the last 4 weeks, and this is what's going on. I don't know about the other health professionals in the room, but for me as a physio, I'm like, excellent. Like, let's dive into this, because it just gives us so much rich information we can use to work together on. But it also starts to put a bit more of the power back in the hands of patients as well. It gives you more tangible, practical things that you can do on a day-to-day, and to give you more insight so that you can better help informed decisions about your own situation and your own care. And so it might be a helpful trigger for things like, using particular strategies if you know that you can sort of be keeping an eye on symptoms and putting things in place proactively. But I think the beauty is, because there's so many different apps, that it really can be customised to your needs, because there isn't a one-size-fits-all. And yeah, for those people who might have limited access to supports, it can mean that there's more that we can actually do in the home setting. So, you might still have need to access particular health professionals at different times, but if there are aspects of that care that you're able to sort of use an app to help support, it might alleviate some of the need to see health professionals more frequently, for example, or, accessing extra care that, otherwise could be done yourself with some support through an app with your existing team. So from a cost and efficiency and access perspective, I think there's a lot of benefits to it.
Thank you, So. Michelle, this I believe is a screenshot of your work phone. What types of apps might you be showing clients as an OT?
Yeah, so I think as an OT, I don't know how much people know about what occupational therapists actually do, but we work on the assumption that we're working with a whole person, so a mind, a body, and a spirit, or soul, life force, whatever you would like to call it. And so I'm also an endorsed mental health OT, so I do some more of the mental health side of the work with people as well, which is why there's a big long list of mental health apps there. But also the executive functioning, so for those of us with brain fog or just difficulties with executive functioning, there's quite a few apps out there, and I'm sure, well, I hope actually, that most of you might have found one that works for you, because there is a variety out there. And it does take a little bit of trial and error to find one that kind of suits you and the way your brain works. And then there's also ones to help with goal setting or time management. I use time timer a lot with people who need a visual for how long something's going to take or how long is left. And then there's obviously the symptoms monitoring ones that we've kind of spoken about a little bit already. One of my favourites is actually Migraine Buddy for people who have migraines. And I think there's the symptom tracking I find hard because, and I think we've spoken about this before, Soph, the challenges with focusing on our symptoms all the time. So I'm interested, Soph. What do you recommend for people?
Very briefly, because I'm conscious that I really do want to hear everyone else on the panel contribute. Yeah. There's so much we've got to get through. Look, I think, like I said, I think apps are great. There's so much great insight we can get. The one warning that I tend to give to people is to think through, when you're using an app, being really intentional with why you're using it and what information that you're getting from it. The one thing I see consistently is that people can sometimes find it quite overwhelming, particularly if you're looking at symptom tracking apps. It can get quite overwhelming to be really sort of focusing and tracking all the time. And so sometimes doing it for sort of a more time limited period, or using it for a period of time to get some data that can be used, and then sort of not necessarily tracking indefinitely can sometimes be a way to go. But I think it comes down to how you as an individual person feels in using it, and making sure that we're comfortable that it is helpful and not necessarily a hindrance for you.
Yeah, great.
Okay, so we're getting into the nitty-gritties of heart rate variability next, and many people in this room will no doubt experience fluctuations in their symptoms. So Caelum, what apps do you find to be helpful for identifying a baseline and then potentially providing feedback and where we are in relation to this baseline?
Yeah, so there are several, as Soph touched on before, and that's why I did really want to hone in on Guava and Visible mostly. So we've talked a little bit about Guava already and how that can be useful, and I guess I'd just echo what you said as well, Soph, around that's how I use Guava myself actually, is often glance at it and it syncs all your data. You don't have to be on there every day to get that useful information, which is fantastic. But yeah, heart rate variability side of things is something, as you can see on screen there, we've started to see a little bit more research come out in our population space of sort of the last 5 to 10 years really, right across the spectrum of EDS, HSD, and often the co-occurring conditions as well. And I guess when we're talking about heart rate variability, it's important to almost define first what we're talking about. So in this particular context here, we're talking about specifically the time domain changes. So and I can guarantee you my heart rate's not sitting at 60, but if it was sitting at 60 right now, it wouldn't be going at 1 beat perfectly every second. It would have very slight changes. And that's the body being able to respond to those physical, social, sensory, environmental demands that we might be placing on it at any one point in time. And that's probably the fall down with HRV really, is that if we don't have a standardised method of measurement, we're just picking up what's happening right now for the individual, which is not overly helpful in most instances. So that's where Visible, I find, can be quite useful. They have, as you can see at the top there, recently submitted a paper. It's still undergoing peer review at this stage, but they looked at 4,000 users of their app over the past few years, and were able to see specifically the interperson changes, so the changes within the individual person matched up quite well with symptoms. So it was able to help essentially be able to give people essentially like a bit of a spoon adjustment for the day of, okay, this is where my nervous system might be, or my body might be sitting after whatever demands I'd placed on it yesterday or the days prior, so that people can help kind of plan their day out as well. The personal baseline for me though is the big thing. Like, we need to make sure that it is personal for the individual, and we don't compare, because if you look at all of these papers that we can see on screen here, most of them for chronic conditions will show that we have reduced heart rate variability. So our goal is not to necessarily increase it, it's to make it a little bit more stable so we don't see those swings from sympathetic to parasympathetic continuously. So maybe here, again, because Slido's down, if I can just get a show of hands, is there anyone that actually does a morning HRV check-in at all in the room? Cool. So, and hopefully we've got a few online as well. But a few things to help optimise that HRV in the morning is to standardise the position, so ideally lying down, not talking or moving, breathing in a normal for you manner, and also making sure that we don't swallow it's an interesting one, but that can be a bit of a vagus nerve stimulator as well. And then it all comes back to the context, like you said before. So we need to view this in terms of value and contextually towards the person's own individual situation. And really without that, for some people, it may not provide them a whole lot of benefit if they can't bring that back to their own individual context.
Thank you. And I'm sure there are a few people wanting to know this in the room, but do you have any thoughts on the use of an Apple Watch or Apple products for HRV?
Yeah. Do you mind if I get a show of hands again of who might use an Apple Watch in the room? Yeah. So a few more than the morning check-in, which is brilliant. So from an Apple Watch side of things, again, this is where the contextual discussion comes in. So in terms of the Apple Watch, as you can see on screen, it'll ping HRV at random times during the day. And what this does is it ends up then expressing it in like an average result for the day, which is a little bit more difficult to interpret. So I'm hoping that this can be a bit of a practical takeaway for people that do have an Apple Watch, where if we're measuring that and it's pinging here, and then it might have pinged when you're asleep, and then it might ping again normally when we're at rest, if we're happening to rest after lunchtime or something, it decontextualises that data, and it can provide some noise, and that's essentially what we see with the up and down on screen there. And that essentially risks turning normal physiological response into something that people might feel as a pathological response, or it might be a pathological response when they go to then interpret their HRV. So for instance here, when someone has coffee, we would expect that HRV to go down because it's a stimulant. So being really mindful of that, I guess, to ensure that we're taking away from it what's important for us. And I've just popped a couple of suggestions around third-party apps to help with that. Unfortunately, the morning check-in one is made for exercises or training, but it does have a very similar use to Visible. And then Heartwatch and Bevel do the overnight check-ins as well. So that can be quite useful.
Yeah, thank you for that extra context. We've had a question about whether there's alternatives.
Yeah. I'm someone that can work oftentimes with what people have, so I don't tend to do a lot of recommending. So what I would normally recommend in that instance is that so the Bevel app and the Heartwatch app, I think that might be like $6 or $8 as a once-off payment for the Heartwatch app. And I think the HRV for training one is pretty similar. It's about $10 or so as a once-off payment. But that then lets us basically turn it into that morning check-in to get that more contextualised input. And then we can also, like from that side of things, we can then also use that with apps like Guava as well. So I would stick with what you've got rather than changing for a lot of people, because Apple Watch has some brilliant tech inside it. But yeah, just using some of those apps to help.
We might just get you a mic if that's okay. just so everyone can hear you.
I was asked to use a Polar H10 HRV and the Garmin Vivo Smart 5 watch, which was provided to me, and I did it for about 6 weeks continuously to get data to see about pacing and all those variabilities, things that are affecting my variabilities, yeah.
Thank you for sharing your insights. And I imagine we'll have some more questions around that, which we'll save for the Q&A. All right, we're moving on to patient engagement now. Scarlett, this is for you. How can virtual connections support someone with EDS or HSD?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, well, first and foremost, virtual spaces allow for social connections. I think everyone in this room is aware of the impact that connecting with other people who understand can have. I think a lot of people think of our virtual support groups, for example, as a place for emotional support, which it certainly is. It's a great place to feel validated and understood by other people in similar positions. But it's also a really great place for information sharing and resource sharing. If you've never attended our virtual support groups, you may have no idea how much information sharing goes on in those groups. People come to our meetings with questions about a particular situation they're in, a health problem they're having, and they get tons of feedback from other people in the group who have maybe been in their shoes before and have something to offer in terms of not just support, but also advice and information and links to resources and things. So attending our virtual support groups or connecting on other online platforms is a great way to get information and resources that you might not be able to get locally or from your healthcare professionals.
And this next question builds on that really, Michelle, but in your experience as a mental health trained OT, what's an important thing that's often missing for individuals with HSD and EDS and their families?
Yeah, so similar to just what Scarlett was saying, I think this idea of mutual aid, so it's actually a framework which I used in my face-to-face support groups back in Sydney quite a few years ago, and then the parent support group that I run as well, where it's really focusing on the give and the take. So feeling like you have the ability and the opportunity to share your lived experience in a way that's going or might help other people. And I think it's just that it's a different mindset, I think. So some support groups that I've been part of is kind of lots of venting, and which is great, we need to do that, it's so important, but it might fall to one or two people to support those people, whereas with the mutual aid model, it's more about encouraging everyone to support each other. So you're getting that connection, you're getting community, and you're feeling like you can turn your experience into something that's helpful for others. So I think that can be a bit of a mindset shift for people, but it's been really helpful for people in the experience that I've had. So that's how I kind of see support groups being really important.
And Scarlett, do you have any recommendations for particular platforms for the community and also for the health professionals in the room?
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of community support platforms, online we do have our virtual support groups. You can see on the screen the different groups that we offer. So we have a variety of demographic groups as well as 4 general groups for anyone with EDS and HSD each month. So those are a great way to connect with other people and really allow you to participate at your own pace and at the level that you're comfortable with. So we have some people join and they're off camera and they're muted, or sometimes they hop on with their microphone to ask a question, but they're really able to participate at whatever level they're comfortable with. We also have a support group and charity directory on our website, and this is a really great resource because in our virtual support groups, obviously we have people from all over the world. So they may not know of local resources in your community. So it's really helpful to connect with people in your local community who have EDS and HSD to be able to find those local resources, find providers, and anything that's available actually within your community. We also have Inspire, which is a really great platform. It's a social media platform that was designed specifically for people with health conditions to connect with each other. And it's a lot more anonymous and targeted towards health communities than other social media platforms like Facebook. That being said, there are some really great Facebook groups online where you can find some really great resources locally and worldwide. We also have our helpline, which offers phone and email support to anyone around the world who has questions related to EDS and HSD. So be it community members or healthcare professionals, if you have questions or are looking for resources, please feel free to reach out to our helpline because that's why we're here. And in terms of professional connection, we have our healthcare professionals directory, which can be helpful for both healthcare professionals and our community, obviously. It's a global directory of healthcare professionals who have submitted their own information to be included in our directory. So I encourage you to look and see what providers are available in your area. We also have our Core Networks of Excellence program and our EDS ECHO program, which Alan has talked about a lot today. So those are some great platforms for professionals.
Some wonderful suggestions, and I know there are a few people furiously scribbling some of these down, and I just want to reassure you that these slides will be available for you after the presentation as well. Coming back to ECHO, which has been running for 6 years this April. Alan, can you talk a little bit more about the impact of the program?
Yeah, no, thank you. So I think this is the last part of this session, and I was thinking about impact in general. My first striking observation is the amount of research that's being done to kind of look at the effectiveness of things and look at outcomes of things. And that's a large part of what we've been doing, sort of reflecting on whether we're doing the right thing or not. And it comes back to your sort of guiding principles on what's the problem, how are we going to solve it, how are we going to test it, how are we going to refine it. You have to be able to collect the data. But one of the other things that also comes to mind in terms of a general principle is how these different technologies and structures are scalable pretty rapidly. And so what this particular slide shows from ECHO's perspective is that scalability. And what you can see here in blue are all of the countries that are now involved, engaged in one way or the other in our ECHO programs. But also those little badges, which were our badges for our 5th anniversary, shows where our hubs are. And our aspirations, of course, are to be all over the world with those hubs. But we started just with one in the United States and one in the UK, Claire Fancomano in the United States and myself. And once you've learned how to use the technologies and you've learned what works in terms of your operational procedures and things like that, you rapidly are able to scale up if you've got the right technology. And that's partly what this represents. And you can see, why we love you guys down here in Australia, New Zealand, Australasia, because we've been able to spend so much time with you. And the world won't know, but most of that is run out of one room in London, scalable because of the technology. And this is just some data of all the things that we've been able to do over the last 5 or 6 years. It grows and grows and grows, and it demonstrates the numbers of hours we've been able to give to this, the specialty lectures, the number of complex cases that we've been able to discuss. We talked about the network overall, but within that network we've been able to get around 110 sort of super experts, if you like, that act as our sort of key sort of speakers and facilitators for these things. And what that brings with it when we think about data is also a huge amount of really valuable material for learning resources, for access for people. We have an incredible library now of really rich material that we can share. And I've shared access to some of that and the resources from session 1 yesterday. And really, from an outcome perspective, we were absolutely thrilled in 2023 at the 20th anniversary of Project ECHO to receive an award for the work that we'd done. So that really validated things after all of that incredible work from the team and all of these outputs.
Such an impactful program.
So I don't think we can ask this because I think it's not working, but we are very, very cognizant that what matters at the end of this entire process is outcomes for patients in getting better care. What we have done, if you go to the next slide, is we've studied perspectives from the clinicians and published this on their perceptions of the increase in their knowledge, the increase in their confidence and their clinical reasoning. Many people come in very unsure of the environment and not sure what they're going to get from it, not sure how much they can give to it, how much they're going to learn from it. And we've also explored their desire and their tendency to network globally, and empathy. We talked a bit about compassion and empathy yesterday. And what we found from our publications is that all of these areas, knowledge, confidence, networking, empathy, they all substantially increase as a consequence of the product that they use. So that's really joyful to see that kind of sort of those outputs. And of course, the other thing is that if you're successful in this way and you can demonstrate the successes, you have an opportunity to grow because you can encourage people through the evidence of the success and the enthusiasm of the program and that scalability. And so this is just a few examples of things that we are about to embark on that talk a little bit more about the issues I was describing in terms of access, where we want to get more people at grassroots in general practice, primary care, emergency care, your paramedics to just become much, much more familiar with this. And so our realization of the technology and the innovative opportunities are that relatively simple things are in play here, but the opportunities are protean, they're vast. Our success and the publication of our success has really afforded that greater opportunity for us.
Comes back to that idea of it doesn't need to be a groundbreaking idea to be an impactful one.
Absolutely. I tell everybody it's just not rocket science. It requires a lot of hard work, and it requires the technologies that you use to be really straightforward, so they are accessible. They are, the utility of them is straightforward, and then the rest just flows.
Flows from there. Well, thank you, panel. I think we are travelling okay for time now. So we'll roll into our Q&A, and I have a few questions here from the room, in the virtual room. I think that this first one might be a good one for you, Alan, in that the question is, how can we coordinate all of our specialists and their egos to meet up and discuss cases together?
I don't know that we can ever coordinate their egos. Where are the neurosurgeons? Sorry, Crash.
Stereotypical.
Sorry, Crash. So this is really interesting. So a colleague of mine, Professor Kazim Aziz, who is one of our internationally renowned neurogastroenterologists in our network in London, has been working on an app that allows all of the professionals in our network and the patients in our network to interact with each other. All the information is there, all the relationships that you would expect to be able to communicate, articulate issues between patient, clinician, clinician, patient, clinician to clinician are all there. And it's using all of those technical platforms, but what's groundbreaking in it is breaking down those barriers of governance and compliance with information in a way that's safe, that's totally appropriate. And he's now testing that. And so what we will have in our network is no longer I've got to get my letter by email across to consultant X with a copy to the patient and the copy to the GP via a very proficient secretary. We actually put it all on one platform, which when you work under one roof in one organisation is dead easy, because it might be on Epic or it might be... So from an information perspective, these kinds of app platforms, technologies, are allowing us to communicate quite dense, complex material in real time with each other, with our patients engaged directly with us too. And of course, you can build into that appointments and various other things. So that doesn't necessarily help you bring in somebody who's got an attitude and a bit of ego and whatnot. But what it might do is it might make that space easier for them to interact with you and just feel, okay, well, this environment feels like an environment I could work in. So we were talking yesterday about breaking down some barriers against resistance. Sometimes the resistance isn't there because people just don't want to know. The resistance is there because life's tough and they're busy doing other bits and pieces. And some of these technologies and the ways in which we can interface with each other allow you to bring new people in to actually become part of this. And make it easier for everybody to engage together collaboratively. So that's just one example of something that's happening locally in the UK. We're actually part of the core networks of excellence, and when this work has been tested, a bit of beta testing going on at the moment, we're going to share it across all of the centres and networks of excellence internationally through that innovation to see whether it works as a platform in other parts of the world.
Thanks for that example. I wonder if any of the other practitioners on the panel would like to weigh in on that question.
Maybe. I was actually just thinking from, I guess, an Australian perspective in terms of allied health and perhaps people who have support workers or support staff. There is an online platform called SameView, which is really designed so that people don't have to keep telling their story over and over and over again to their care workers. And allied health can log in, and as well, like you invite your allied health professionals to log in, and I assume medical professionals could be invited too, but I'm not sure that they have the time. So I think that's a big obstacle and barrier for people. So that's something, I think there's probably other apps out there that kind of do the same, but I think it is super challenging to get everyone to talk to each other, and I think our Medicare billing and things like that is not good enough to allow our GPs and our specialists to all meet together for a case conference. My professionals have never had a case conference in my whole life. So that's the standard of that we're working with here in Australia. I don't know what happens elsewhere, but it's really hard. And our GPs really do become the key professional. I call them the team captain, and a bit of a signposter. But it's hard for them to find the time that matches up with everyone to jump on a call or a Zoom or anything like that. So we are still using letters back and forth, and it's challenging.
And that is very real. I mean, I can't get people to pick up the phone. They're too busy.
Yeah.
But producing those platforms that act as a vehicle to bring everybody together in a simple way, I think breaks down some of those things.
Yeah.
If you can just say to somebody, it's okay, there are 10 of us and we're all going to meet here and this is how it works, then the easier you can make it, the more likely you are to break down some of that resistance.
Yeah, and I think I heard someone say yesterday that it's really important to have someone leading that process. Yeah. I've been in quite a few larger teams with maybe 8 or 10 health professionals, and I've just found that in terms of coordinating team meetings, if someone's not driving that, someone's not setting up the poll to say, these are some times when we can all meet, choose your option. Here's the platform we'll be meeting on. And tech in terms of Zoom or whatever Teams people might be using is great, but I think someone really driving that process.
And I think it's really important to highlight that then the load falls on the patient. And I don't know, I feel like that's not really okay.
No, that's not okay.
When people are dealing with so much and struggling to get out of bed, and to then have to coordinate a team of 5, 10, 15 people to talk to each other is, I don't know, as an OT, I wouldn't want my clients being the one responsible for organising all of us. But it happens, and it happens for myself, even getting 2 doctors to talk to each other, or making sure a letter is sent to all of the team. And so I just want to validate that for anyone else who is feeling that it's not really, it's really hard. It's really hard to be the one driving your care when you're the one that's actually not well.
I think it's also too recognising that there is a privilege there, in the sense that as a health professional, if I pick up the phone and I'm trying to coordinate a meeting with someone's GP and their psychologist, there is a privilege in that me as a health professional reaching out makes it much more likely that those professionals are going to be, willing to kind of work and respond. It is so much harder for patients to sort of be able to have these conversations. And don't get me wrong, some health professionals are brilliant and will move heaven and earth to make it work if you ask them. But there is that privilege that comes with it. And I think I agree totally with what you've just said. I think we as health professionals need to play more of an active role in helping to facilitate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just need systems change as well, because Medicare is not paying our clinicians to have those meetings. So they can't make time for it because they have to cover all their expenses and all those sorts of things. So it's just, I feel like we're falling through the cracks. Yeah.
And Louise yesterday, she talked about sort of working with the patient and with family, maybe community advocates in preparation for these kinds of meetings, and also sort of working with them afterwards. One of the other roles as a healthcare professional advocate bringing teams together is that sometimes you just have to reach out to a few individual members within that group, and you need to have that one-to-one with them. That 15 minutes with them, that, as you say, only you can do as a healthcare professional. But you need that insight if you're going to take on that leadership to facilitate it as much as possible. So be ready for some of that background work on top of the actual meeting itself, just to make sure everybody's in the room on the same page.
Sounds like we could really keep going with this one, but I might direct a question to Scarlett, and that is around how can you make a virtual space feel welcoming and inclusive?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and something that we consider very carefully on my team. So for one, we always try to celebrate and embrace the differences and intersectionality in our community, and we've created specific spaces for specific demographics. So you may have seen on a previous slide that we have a group for the LGBTQIA+ community, We recently introduced a Communities of Color group. And these are really great spaces. I've had the opportunity to host the LGBTQIA+ group over the years, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but it's definitely my favorite group because they are just so kind and supportive, and it really creates an opportunity to talk about things that they might not feel comfortable talking about in a more general group with people who may not understand or may be more judgmental. I mean, generally our groups are very accepting and supportive in general, but it just creates a really special space for these people to connect with other people who really understand the space that they're in. I would also say something that's really helpful for creating inclusive virtual spaces is having clear community guidelines and codes of conduct. So for our virtual support groups, we do have a code of conduct, and that means that if anything goes wrong, we can just point to that code of conduct. We don't have to really justify why what was said or done was not appropriate. We have that code of conduct that we can point to, and we can say that they violated the terms of the code of conduct, which fortunately hasn't been a huge problem for us in our virtual spaces, but it's really helpful to just have that, as well as on social media, for example, which that has come into the light a lot more frequently, kind of because we all know that there are a lot of interesting things that are said online about EDS and HSD. So having those rules and guidelines for any sort of virtual space that you're creating can really promote inclusivity. And lastly, I guess I would say time zones. We're very aware that we have a global community that we're serving. So when we create virtual support groups, for example, we try to make sure that we are covering different time zones so that people across the world are able to participate.
Sounds like you're really leading the way.
Mike, can I just chip in there, because it's something that Scarlett won't say for herself. But I think one of the other really important things for people that are leading these is that you have to have the compassion, you have to have the empathy, you have to be somebody who is very self-aware and self-reflective, and have that kind of emotional intelligence, both individually and the emotional intelligence of your organisation. And that doesn't come overnight. It comes with a certain amount of innateness and skill, and it comes with a lot of rehearsal and practice. And I think what's really important when I see these things done really, really well, and I see it within the community team, and I see it within our facilitators and our advocates, is that there are these fundamental facets to their behaviour and their skill sets that should never be taken for granted, because it's so fundamentally important to have that kind of behaviour, to set up that kind of culture and that safe space.
Yeah, well said. Something that we haven't talked about a lot, but is a very hot topic at the moment, is artificial intelligence. And I thought I would just pose this question to anyone on the panel who wants to speak to it, how that might be impacting your practice now, and maybe if you have any plans to be using that in the future.
I can jump in. Look, I won't profess to be an AI expert, but definitely agree it's a bit of a hot topic at the moment. It's interesting, there are so many potential applications of AI, and I think even talking about all of the apps and resources we have now, in theory, AI has so much potential to really augment those existing apps. And so I guess that it's interesting to think that AI is only as good as the information we put into it. They look pretty intelligent on the surface, but really they're just, looking at information available and sort of regurgitating in a very complex and sophisticated way, but it's still, not necessarily thinking autonomously. But I think the potential for it to, tie in with a lot of the apps and things that we're using now is huge. I'm actually really interested more from a health professional perspective, to be honest, because I know that there are a lot of use of AI in terms of like note-taking and transcription type things being used now, which, Mel, you touched on earlier, that a lot of health professionals are, burnt out, short on time, overloaded. And so to be able to use these technologies to sort of reduce the load on health professionals so that they can sort of have a bit more breathing room in their day, I think that is always going to translate to, better, how people can operate a bit better in their day. But I think even just giving a different frame of reference. So whenever we're talking to someone, as a health professional, if I'm having a conversation with a patient, I'm listening to that conversation, and what I am taking away and what I am picking up on is always going to be influenced by my own existing perspective and the biases that I bring. So, for me now as someone who's informed on EDS, for example, I may be more alert to some of the things that people might be mentioning to me that could be those little, red flag signs that maybe this is what's going on, even if they're not diagnosed yet. But we know a huge issue is that getting recognition and diagnosis in the community is massive. So what interests me is if we could potentially embed AI within some of the note-taking processes and other technology we use, could that potentially be used to help actually raise awareness at that ground level? If a transcription of a consult can sort of flag that, hey, this person's reporting, all of these joint issues and a lot of GI issues and all of these, different things going on, could it potentially act as a flag where that AI assistant could go, have you considered that maybe this could be going on? And of course, it's always going to need the checking with health professionals. We're never going to rely on it to be the sole, you see something that's AI embedded and they're going to do all of your care for you and we're all going to get replaced and be out of a job. But in terms of streamlining and really helping to support some of the clinical reasoning, I think there's a lot of really interesting uses there in future.
I agree. I think I heard someone speak recently on the topic of AI in a different setting outside of healthcare, but he spoke to it as a tool, and that's maybe potentially how we should view it. But I am curious, like you, Soph, about the future of AI in diagnostics in particular. Was there anyone else on the panel that...
Yeah, I was just going to mention actually something that you touched on yesterday, Alan, in regards to being quite helpful for people to bring in all of their documentation, medical history. Could AI, and does it already, play a role in being able to provide that summary? So we can feed all of that information in and we can get that concise 1 to 2 page summary if it's, again, like you touched on before, Michelle, we don't want that burden to fall on the patient to provide, but are there things that we can implement as a health professional? I'm not aware of anything, but it would be useful, I think, as a tool for sure.
I mean, one of the great opportunities for us as the Ehlers-Danlos Society is we get to talk to people all over the world about all the amazing things that they're doing, and AI comes up a lot. And just a couple of examples of things that we're aware of. So there's an amazing team at Stanford, and some of our colleagues who are in the audience have actually been to one of their hackathons recently, which sounds really intriguing to me. We basically get locked down and you try and completely blast this tool to see whether it works or not. But they're looking at language that's used, information that's provided, documentation that might be available on medical notes against all of the entire literature, and how AI can basically amass all of that in an incredible amount of information in a very short space of time and give you some kind of literal sense of what may be going on. Do I believe that we're at a stage where it can replace us? No, I don't. And there's been some studies that have been published showing it's still not quite as good as your doctor, which means it's not very good. No, sorry. Which means but where I think it is starting to help is exactly as you're describing. It's flagging a set of thoughts that wouldn't necessarily have crossed somebody's mind at this point in time. And it's young and it's naive and it's picking up information, and it will grow undoubtedly, and we have to be in that space and be part of that space. But there are other researchers all over the world that are doing this kind of work. But the other area that's critically important for us, and it comes back to the data, is that AI is fantastic at handling huge amounts of data and trawling through tons of research data in very short spaces of time. So if we go right back to when I were a lad and I was doing, sort of very basic t-testing and all sorts of crazy stuff, looking at logistic regression to get odds ratios, and everybody's looking at me now and says, is he talking double Dutch? I mean, this all took a lot of manual time. AI can do all of this in minutes. So in the right hands, utilising AI in the right way with those tools, it's a fantastic statistics tool as well for really, really dense, deep, complex data.
Yeah. And maybe I'll just finish the point on AI around from a health professional perspective, and as a business or an organisation that's implemented AI for our practitioners, for note-taking and for reporting. We've had a couple of practitioners in our team report that it's been a bit of a game changer, to be honest, in terms of not having to mentally exert to pick up each and every little detail, knowing that there's something there that's picking up the conversation. There are, of course, issues around privacy and confidentiality, so I think we need to be really aware of that and be very choosy which platforms that we are selecting.
Yeah.
And then there are issues around consent as well, and making sure that we gain consent from the people who are, being listened to in those conversations.
Yeah, you should be, if a health professional is asking to record your session for the purposes of using AI, you need to be consenting to that. So make sure that that is happening. And I just wanted to add, Mel, that just if we're using it as patients, just being careful of what data we put into AI systems, because the levels of privacy, depending on which one it is very different. And so just being aware that what you put in, we don't know where it goes necessarily. Yeah. So just being really careful about the specifics of what you put in.
I think checking the outputs too, there's known issues with like AI hallucinating things.
Yeah.
So, it's never going to be a standalone, cool, we've had our session, it's transcribed, here's the output. It still does come down to health professionals still checking and quality control and making sure it's all reflective. So, yeah, it's still got a ways to go before we're all out of a job. But, I think it's a really useful tool.
And especially in our cohort, I think as well, where there may not be that back-end data to put into AI. Mm-hmm. And so it may not have that body of research that lived experience almost as us as clinicians, and I understand some of them some of the AI tools for note-taking do start to learn our behaviours as clinicians, but that's probably the other thing to mention as well of there's still conflicting research, and there are still, depends on what area of the research that AI decides to
perfect example.
Use as a source. Yeah.
ChatGPT told me that the creators of the Baton score, they gave me the wrong names. They switched the names. And I was like, oh. So, you have to check what comes out.
Case in point.
And for me in all of this, thinking about governance and compliance from a research perspective, or from a GDPR or a HIPAA perspective, any of those compliance regulations, the technology nearly always goes faster than the regulation. Mm-hmm. And so as we use it, we have to be really cognizant as to whether we're tripping over and beyond the ethics and the governance and the regulation. And so always flag caution, and you're usually okay, but you should always ask that question.
Yeah.
So the last question that I saw before the iPad
you can ask from the room as well.
Was around what to do if a doctor isn't listening to us. So I might pose that to Michelle so we can pick up on the thread where we left off. Then I'm going to send the iPad down to Alan to see if he can get the questions
Well,
back
we've been
up
asked actually if we can
you can
just
do it
ask
from the
questions
room.
from the room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There were some...
With the
more on
roaming box, I think. Sorry.
There were more on there, were there?
There were, but it's gone.
Okay. So what was the question about?
The question was the last question I saw, which related to what we spoke about before.
Yep.
That the ego's in the room. But what do you have some practical ways that people might be able to, get their doctors to listen?
I'm a bit cautious that some of my doctors might be listening. So, I think this is, almost universally a challenge for us, is we feel unheard. So I know myself that I can have a bit of sensitivity to that. If I go to a new doctor, I'm like, are they going to believe me? So just being aware of that for yourself, is that something that you're actually bringing into the room, which is totally valid and legit because that's our experience. But then also, I have learnt to manage some egos by not trying to tell the doctor what to do. I might come in and ask them a question, and I might suggest, I've read this. Is that something that makes sense to you, or could we explore that? I very rarely will come in and say, I found this on Google. I want this, because they'll just turn around and say, absolutely no. So crafting your your questions, crafting your interaction. You still want to be authentic and you still, want to have a real relationship with the professional, but it's also realising that a lot of doctors, especially those who don't come to conferences like this, I think they feel threatened, right, by our knowledge of our own bodies, the research that we've done, we've been forced to do to educate ourselves about our bodies, our lives, everything that's going on. So knowing that they may actually be intimidated or threatened or just not expecting a client or a patient to come in and be so knowledgeable, or that can be really challenging. But I think it's a give and take, because I go in there as a OT patient, not a doctor. So I also have to respect that the professional that I'm going to has knowledge and information that I need to help me. So yeah, it's balancing the two. And in terms of trying to be heard, I will try 1 or 2 times in a conversation to make my point. And then if I'm not being listened to, I will leave. Okay, so that's my experience. I'm like, no, we're not doing more traumatisation by doctors. So if we can't get to where we need to go in that first appointment, then it's game over for me personally. But everyone's journey with that is different. So I think just being really aware of that. And I just want to also say, totally want to validate the experience of leaving the doctor's room and bursting into tears, because you absolutely don't feel like you were heard or that you got anywhere, and you just wasted your money, your time, your energy, your spoons, all of those things. So if that's your experience too, I hear you, I feel you. So yeah, it's hard, I think. There's no right or wrong answer. It's a journey. And if we all had doctors like Alan here, then we wouldn't be having this conversation.
I'd be out of a job, wouldn't I?
Yeah, you wouldn't have a job.
I wouldn't have a job. Echo would be redundant.
Echo would be gone.
Sounds like bliss.
But I think that's probably why we were talking about that mutual aid model before as well, to be able to work both ways with patients and clinicians and doctors, etc.
And all helping each other. And, that's why support groups are so important too, because people do come and just go, whoa, is it okay that this just happened? And people say, no, that's not okay. You shouldn't be treated like that. Or maybe give you some ideas of different ways to approach things as well. I know we have a specific question over there. Do we have a mic?
I was just also maybe just reflecting on some of my experience working with general practitioners in their training who come to a lot of our courses. And I like to start from the place that nobody's trying to do you any harm, and nobody's kind of coming from a bad space, and some people are allowed bad days of their own, and it's not, it's never a perfect world, right? Yeah. Of course, there are some people out there that are just going to give you a rough time, and that's totally inappropriate. But the majority, I think, come from a space of just not knowing what they don't know, and giving them the space for it to be okay for them to realise they don't know and want to learn is really important. I was at a meeting recently where a GP just decided to put his hand up and just say, the most important thing that I've learned today from this entire meeting is to listen and learn. And we talked about that a little bit yesterday. And a self-reflection realisation that they just didn't really know, but it was okay to not know, it was not okay to not learn, and it was not okay to not then help. That's when it becomes a problem. And you will come across in every walk of life people that have got unconscious bias. And in medicine, unconscious bias can be a real tricky problem, because we're trained in a particular way and we see things in a particular way, and therefore when a set of symptoms is presented to us, it's considered in a particular way because the brain has mapped it that way. What you're trying to do is you're trying to flip that map in somebody who spent 10 years putting that map into their brain.
Yeah.
And that's hard. And so that learning experience, that sharing experience is the way to get them on side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is the experience a lot of us have of feeling like if you don't fit the box, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like it's all in your
Yeah.
head, or it's, this can't possibly be true because you didn't tick all 10 out of 10 things
Yeah.
on the list that's in the doctor's head, with no explanation as well. So I think communication is a big part of it. And so I will go back to doctors who can communicate and are happy to have an open conversation. But there are some doctors I won't go back to, and that's my choice as a client. So, yeah.
I think we're rapidly running out of time, but there was a question at the back there.
Sorry. My question is, just to add on to what you were saying, when we go to an emergency room and we get completely dismissed because the guys just don't know what we're doing and they just send us off with an endone and send us home, how do we deal with that situation in terms of kind of educating the specialists there?
Yeah. I would say from my experience, trying to educate them in that moment when you're presenting to emergency is not the right time, because you're going to emergency because there's a problem and you might be unwell, you might be really anxious, stressed, whatever it is. But being able to do that at another time or have someone else with you to advocate for you is really important. But I also try to remind myself that here in Australia, emergency departments are for emergencies, and they will patch you up and send you home to your own specialist and GP unless you're going to die, right? That's the reality, right? So we can't expect them to have the solution to our problem, but we do want to expect that they can treat us fairly and well and not harm us. Can you add anything, Alan?
Yeah, I had the fortune/misfortune of running an accident and emergency department for 5 years in the UK. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the guys that are sitting there, girls that are sitting, that are doing this work are there for emergencies, and they patch up. But the system expects them to either refer back into the community for the community to pick up where they have left off, or into the hospital to experts for them to pick up. So sometimes it might not seem intuitive, but it's not necessarily the right place to try and teach them.
No.
The people from the community and the people in the hospital might be the right people to teach them about the resources that are available for our community based on the needs when they present to A&E. Now, we're just exploring this at the moment, although we want to go out and do a lot of work with people in ECHO, looking at accident and emergency rooms, paramedics, first responders. What we absolutely want to do is we want to make those programs bespoke for them. There is no point us going to them and teaching them about the rarer types and the genetics and everything. It's the practicalities day to day. What does this look like commonly for people that are presenting in your space? And what do you need as a team to know how best to help them so that they are consciously aware of their lack of knowledge, become knowledgeable, but become more confident about the system. However, it is a system, so that they've got to be able to refer to people in the community that can pick up that end. They've got to be able to refer to people in the hospital so they can pick up at that end. The emergency room cannot do this of itself.
I would just say one more important thing. If you have something that is a recurring issue for you that you do need emergency care for, have a conversation with that department at that hospital when you're not in crisis of any kind, so that they do have an idea. So I actually have a flag on my file for one of my conditions so that they know that if I come in, I'm going straight through, right? But that's because if they didn't take me through, I could die. Right? So just being really specific to where you are and just making them aware, especially with vascular types and things like that, right? Your local team need to know what like what you might be presenting.
You're establishing a care plan
Exactly.
across the system.
Yeah, because it's like a frequent integration, like with that, interaction with that department.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And there's an app for that, right? There must be an app for that.
There must be an app for it.
We have it in our app, actually. We, in the Ehlers-Danlos Society app, there is a section for emergency care guidelines, so you can put the information for your emergency care plan into our app so that it's available when you need it.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. I think that's a really good example of teamwork and a great place to finish. Maybe not. Yes, we will finish. So we are running into the break. But for our friend at the back who has a question, please come and
ask us.
chat to us.
Yeah.
Happily answer that for you. Thank you to this incredible panel. It's been wonderful spending the morning with you. And can we give them a round of applause?
Well done.